and welcome back to another episode of the Oner podcast, the podcast where we break down and review films all in one big, long, unbroken take. I'm Austin Archer, and with me, as always, is my childhood next-door neighbor and lifelong best friend,
Cramer, England.
Okay, I don't have any Snow White merch, so I thought this was kind of in the color palette. This sort of looks like her, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like yellow.
Yeah.
Like, look, like the blue at the top of is like her shirt.
Yeah.
She's got like the
Goes
red,
down in the red little
and then her
things on the
skirt
shoulder.
down
Yeah,
here.
that's good.
If I turn
That's
it
good.
this way, you know.
Yeah, it's Snow White.
Yeah,
and she's probably a fan of NASCAR.
She loves NASCAR. Snow White is.
She'd be there.
She loves when the
every
cars come by and
Yeah.
she can feel the vibration. She like Molly Shannon and Talladega Nights. She can feel the vibration of the cars. That's Snow White. That's so Snow White coded. And that's who I imagine Snow White will grow up to be, is like an alcoholic who.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. She's had a really weird adolescence for sure.
Yeah,
if you can't tell, we went and saw Disney's live action Snow White 2025.
Yes. And actually, I got to ask you. So at the end of our podcast last week, we talked after we were recording, and I said I had to go see it with my daughters.
Right.
And you said did you see it alone or did you see it with anyone?
I saw it with my girlfriend.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. That's nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't have to go alone.
Just be a middle-aged man in the theater, like
oh. See, that's what I was
here.
Very much trying to avoid. Like, so I had to wait. Anyway, we're with my daughters. But
did your daughters enjoy it?
They did. They liked it, and I was so happy to be with them. I was happy that they were happy. After the movie, we talked about it, and they started dancing in the parking lot, and it was so cute to see them. But
okay, so I sort of approached my partner like this. I was like, listen, I've got to go see Snow White.
Yeah.
We're doing it on the podcast. Will you come with me so that I don't have to? I was like, it's not going to be good, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation that you and I had, is like, yeah, let's go see it because I guess people are going to be talking about it. And I don't think as many people are talking about it online as I thought would be, but here we are talking about it. And never let anyone say that we don't cover a wide range of topics on this show, because here we are talking about, a very, very kind of silly movie. But what happened is, at the end of the movie, I turned to her and I went, okay, so am I just like tripping, or was that kind of fine? Because I think it was just that my expectation was so low, and I expected to kind of be sitting in the theater rolling my eyes every few minutes going, oh, come on.
Yeah.
But then the whole movie, I kept being like, when's it going to get really bad? Like, when am I going to start being like angry at how bad the movie is? Because I feel like when I went and saw Kraven the Hunter, I was kind of like sitting in the theater, like, I'm mad that they spent as much money as they did on this. And there are movies where I'm sitting in the theater going, when is it over? Even Mickey 17, I was like, is this movie over yet? I don't like it. And I, don't get me wrong, at the top of the show here, Snow White 2025, directed by Mark Webb, starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, is not great cinema. It's not a masterpiece. It's not brilliant, in many ways. But there's something about the tone of a certain genre of movie that, if it manages to be mostly an enjoyable watch, I will forgive all the silly plot devices or contrivances, plot holes. And what I found several times while watching Snow White was like, a musical number would end and I'd go, I kind of liked that. Like, I would be like, that was a good song. Like, that was a well-staged musical number. And then like the dwarves showed up and I was like, I don't hate these as much as everyone said I'm supposed to. I was like, I kind of I feel like I wish I would have gotten to know some of them more, but the movie ended and I just was kind of like, I don't know. I didn't actively hate watching that.
Yeah.
So did you have a different experience? Were you just going, oh my gosh, this movie can't end fast enough?
I was a little bit more on that side. I was just kind of like, okay, when's it going to end? This movie, all the controversy around it made it seem like it was going to be worse than it was. Now, having said that, the movie is really bad. And I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, there's a lot that we're going to get into with this because I was kind of like, I wasn't like, if all the stuff around the movie hadn't happened, people would probably be saying, oh, just like, oh, it's middle of the road. Like, but because of all the controversy around it, it's made it even worse. And it's made the people who really hate it even more. Like they just, and I think it goes into more than why it's not that they hate this movie. It's that most of the people that hate this kind of hate Disney as a whole and
There's
kind of
so
hate like Rachel
yeah.
Zegler as a whole. Like it's kind of, they just kind of want something to hate.
There are
Right.
so many things going into the the vitriol that this movie had before it was even released.
Yes,
And I think that part of this is I think Disney kind of dropped the ball on some of the way that they handled
they
marketing
did.
this film. Uh,
Absolutely.
but like because I posted about this movie on Threads and I said, "You're not gonna believe this or agree with it, but Snow White is fine. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not as bad as you expected it to be.
Yeah.
It's perfectly watchable. Your kids
Yeah.
will enjoy it.
Yes.
It has some really lovely moments that are actually kind of delightful. Rachel Zegler has several, musical numbers that are really, like, impressive to watch, and, like, there's execution from Mark Webb of certain sequences that's like not terrible. That's like, oh, like this
Yeah.
is like I found like the animals to be cute, and I found like the update on Dopey to be cute. I was like, I like this idea that he's not like
Y
dumb, he's
right,
quiet,
right. Yeah,
and
I can
yeah,
see that. I thought he
yeah.
looked like a living nightmare, but still.
Look, look,
That
I also gotta say this too about this movie. I don't have the uncanny valley thing that a lot of people have.
okay.
I don't see like I co-host this show called The Line on
Yeah,
YouTube sometimes,
yeah,
and they just did a new logo rebrand, and the audience of the show is so furious about the logo rebrand. And I realized like I just don't think I'm that guy who like notices design things and goes
yeah,
like, no, that's a terrible logo, or like, like
yeah, yeah,
I don't, and I've never been a guy like, like when the live action version of Aladdin was coming out and everyone got their first look at Will Smith as the genie, and the internet was just like, no way, that's so
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
But I was like, what did you think Will Smith as the genie was going to look like? Because in my mind, that's it. It's like kind of a cartoon. It's
yeah,
CGI,
yeah,
and he's the blue genie from the cartoon, but it's Will Smith's face and like a more like realistic human body because
yeah,
that's what it would in my brain. It's just sort of like, I don't, what do you expect a live action version of the Seven Dwarfs to look like? And in my brain, it's like, I don't know what they're supposed to look like if not that. And
yeah,
so,
and
yeah,
actually, this is a very
yeah,
interesting point because what I thought they're very off-putting to me.
yeah,
I'm much more forgiving. Like when Aladdin came out, I was like, "Oh, okay." Like the first trailer looked they looked pretty weird.
yeah,
But then like that was an early version. And when
mhm,
the movie actually came out, it looked totally fine. And I actually like Aladdin. I thought it was actually a really I it's one of the better live action in my opinion that I
yeah,
enjoyed. But these the Seven Dwarfs in this just they were I don't know, they were just very very off-putting for me.
mhm.
um, what I thought they should have done is kind of like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and they could have made all the animals and the seven dwarves much more cartoonish, but more
Like more like
3D.
Space Jam.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah.
And but maybe make them even a little bit more cartoony, like
I think that like I really kind of think you have to do one or the other. I think that like
yeah,
if you try to do like Pixar characters mixed with live, like if like Rachel Zegler's
yeah,
live, but the dwarfs and animals are animated to be like they would in like a Pixar film.
right.
I I don't know that I I feel like it's gotta be like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where it's like 2D cartoon characters
Right.
interacting with 3D people,
Which
which
would be interesting.
I think it could be interesting to do it that way.
Yeah.
Problem is, I'm like, it's not these things are already one of the big
Yeah.
criticisms is that they don't adapt them enough. It's just like you're just remaking the thing that already exists, but in a better
Yes.
form. And I think if you did live action Rachel Ziegler and live action Gal Gadot with like 2D animated characters that looked exactly like the original film, it would be a little like, "What are we
Yeah,
doing? Like, what
yeah.
are we doing here?" Like,
It's
well, like,
very,
you
very
know?
true. And
So
I
it's sorta
actually,
like, what are you supposed to do? You
yeah.
know? Yeah.
Well, don't make the movie.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
ultimately, I
yeah.
but for sake of argument, I think, and then let's talk about this because I think it's a really interesting issue that I have no, I don't have a feeling towards. I think it's just an interesting issue because the fact that they decided not to cast dwarves, people who have dwarfism in the role of the dwarves.
Mhm.
And this seems to have divided the dwarf community because
Little people, little person.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, little people really, there's a lot. I've looked at a few different things, and a lot of people were, you just took away 7 huge opportunities for us to get an acting job,
But then on
and
the
then
other end, there are people like that
like Peter
say
Dinklage,
ex Dinklage, who's like, "Hey," but also
yeah,
Dinklage has been one of the more fortunate people in that
absolutely,
community to be able to play
yeah,
roles where, and so it's like
yeah, he can play in a role that could possibly go to a, a
person without who yeah,
person
yeah,
without, yeah,
dwarfism, yeah.
dwarfism, and
Mhm.
so it's a very interesting argument because I can see both sides, and again, I don't have a connection to this, so I can't. My opinion is not worth anything, or it's not worth a lot. But I lean a little bit more towards, this movie itself isn't treating the dwarves in a negative manner.
Mhm.
It's not treating them as they're not poking fun at them. They're not, saying anything negative about them. So I kind of lean towards, well, maybe you should have just done 7 dwarfs and given them the opportunity. But again, this is, take it with a grain of salt. What do you think? I mean, what's your opinion on it?
I don't know, and again, it's because I'm not a member of the community, and I'm not
Yes,
plugged
me
in
neither.
enough with the community, and I do know that it is kind of a divisive
Yeah,
issue in
yeah,
the like, that's what I know enough to know that there's not consensus, that
yes,
and so, again, I think that I get your point of being like, "Then don't do it." Like,
yeah, 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 yeah,
if you don't know how to accomplish something in a way that doesn't feel problematic or dismissive in some way,
yeah,
then maybe just sort of like if they were like, we're gonna do a live action Aristocats, and it's like, are you gonna do those Siamese cats that are like, like are you gonna do those
yeah,
Siamese cats?
yeah,
And then
yeah,
what are those gonna look like? And they're like, well, what if we got like Aquafina and
yeah,
Kihi Kwan to play
yeah.
them? It's like, don't do
No,
that. I don't think
please
that
don't.
don't do that either. Like, don't
Yeah,
it's like, so it's like, what's the fix? And it's like, maybe the fix is you just leave that in the past where it belongs. You just
right,
say,
right.
maybe you just leave it where that where and I agree with that. The, since Disney is not going to do that, since they are
Well,
going to continue making these things, and maybe who knows
yeah,
that this maybe if enough of them perform poorly enough, they'll stop. Um, and this movie's
yeah,
not doing great at the box office. But I also, like, had this conversation leaving the theater of, like, I don't know what audiences want from these movies because when
yeah,
they do a shot for shot remake, people go like The Lion King, which it was basically the exact same film,
yeah.
just with really, really impressive photorealistic animation that also made the movie worse because the animals didn't have facial expressions. And so it
Very
was like
true.
it's
Yes.
like, yeah, this movie was really pretty to look at, but the original it's the exact same movie as the original,
Yeah.
and the original's better because when Simba's trying to get his dad to wake up after the stampede, it's way more emotional because
Oh,
he
yeah.
he
Yeah.
can emote and we can,
Yeah, you can relate so much more to the overexpression in animation than
right.
you can the underexpression of trying to make something look real. Yeah.
Right, and but people they don't like that, but then
No.
when they come in or even like Beauty and the Beast, which is like very close to the original, but they add some new elements. They
Yeah.
add a few
Yeah.
new musical numbers or something. But then there's this, which is basically taking the visual aesthetic of the original,
Yeah.
but doing very much their own thing with the story outside of 2 numbers. They do Hi Ho and they do Whistle While You Work, but everything else feels very fresh and new and a new spin. And then people don't like that either. So it's like, what do
Yeah.
people want from these movies? Do they want, and maybe the answer is just don't do them. No one wants it.
Yeah. Yeah, they kinda don't want them, at least not as much as because I mean, this movie cost 270 million before print and advertising, so it's around
That's
300 million.
crazy.
Yeah, all in, they're never
That's
gonna make their money
insane.
back.
That's
So,
so crazy.
yes, and it's like, yeah, what do people want from these movies? When it first came out, like, when Cinderella first came out actually, 101 Dalmatians did this back in the '90s, which is kinda funny. Do you remember that movie with Jeff Daniels?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, they
And,
did it then, but
Glenn Close.
yes, Glenn, yeah, yeah,
Glenn
and they did a
Close,
second
yeah.
one too. They did it, yeah. But anyway, this trend really started around, around 2014, 2015, whenever Cinderella came out. And they've been doing and then they keep doing them, and it's like people were excited at the beginning, now they're not too excited about them anymore. And it's not necessarily that I mean, I think it's just so divisive. I mean, some people love them, some people hate them, but you're not getting a hit every time. And this one, I'm wondering if this is going to be kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, and they just kind of move on. They still have Lilo and Stitch that's coming out.
And to be fair, I think that the trailer for that movie is really cute.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
I
I
think
like
it's really
Lilo and
cute.
Stitch. I think
Yeah.
it lends that one for some reason lends itself more to a live
It
action.
really does. It almost
There's
seems like
certain
it
ones that
should have
do and
been
don't.
live act yeah, I know. Yeah.
So it's I don't know. It's kind of funny. And then you've also got DreamWorks who's kind of doing it now. It's How to Train Your Dragon.
I
I need
almost think that I think that actually the compromise is this from when you were like, maybe it should be more like Who Framed Roger Rabbit,
right, right.
is maybe if you want to do an updated Snow White, it should be a new Disney animated movie. And it should be animated in the style of like Princess and the Frog or something, where it's like, it's a new
Right,
Disney
right.
animated film. It's Snow White, but it's an updated version. And I actually think people would be more receptive to
Mm,
that, where it's like an entirely animated movie. It's not a recreation of the other thing. It's a modern adaptation, and it's
yeah,
its own thing, which this very much was. But the fact that they're trying to kind of have it both ways and be like, we are living in the visual aesthetic of the
yeah,
original cartoon,
right.
but we're also doing very much so our own thing with the storytelling. It's like, okay, well then, I don't. It's almost
Yeah,
like pick one or the other.
yeah. Or I mean, just do more. Just stick to your animation. Start
Yeah,
making original animation again, which I mean they are, but
yeah.
well, kind of. Stick to original animation, and then let's just make some different original films. Like we've talked about this before. I think there's a lot of people really want original films that are not based on other movies.
Mhm.
And I'm saying other movies specifically because if it's based on a book, that's fine. We can see that as an original movie if it hasn't been made before.
Yeah.
But like it's okay to base it on some sort of existing IP if the IP is not as widely known. But let's start making more original films. The problem with that, I know that a ton of people want that, at least in the people that I talk to, we all want more original movies. The problem is that a lot of these remakes, sequels, and all of them, they're making the money. They're making the money at the box. This one obviously not, but they're the ones who are making money at the box office. And
Peop
now,
yeah, so many people who do this, who are commentators on YouTube and
yeah,
on online in the movie space, are constantly trying to tell audiences, like, you can't simultaneously complain about the lack of
yes,
original storytelling in Hollywood and
yes,
also only reward Hollywood for making
yeah.
unoriginal
It's
remakes.
it's our own fault. It's
Right.
our fault.
Yeah.
Like, we have to take responsibility in this. And
Mhm.
I mean, I want more original movies, and I'm to blame, though, because I will go see those. But also the crappy thing is the original movies that they make are not very good.
Well, that's why
Like
2 weeks ago, I still said, I think people should see Mickey 17.
exactly,
I said,
yes.
even though I don't like it, I think that because I'm like, a lot of people seem to like it, and you might go to it and like it. So you should go to it, if for no other reason than it's even though it's an adaptation of a book, it's a new
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
It's something you aren't already aware of. It's not like
yeah.
you know.
It's yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So it would be great to have more new movies, and maybe this is the one. It actually would be kind of ironic if the first animated feature length movie was Snow White, and the last real live action movie would also be Snow White. So it's kind of like a bookend.
Mhm.
Again, of course, we have Lilo and Stitch, but if this is the one that really gets them to be like, you know what, maybe we stop doing these, that would be interesting.
I I doubt it,
I
personally.
doubt it.
I think one
Well,
box office failure is not gonna
no.
stop them. I think it's gonna take several before they.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it could. We'll see how Lilo and Stitch does. I
Exactly.
guess.
I
So,
mean, like, look how like when Moana 2 just like absolutely crushed. Like, when
oh yeah.
they were
Yeah.
gonna release that on Disney Plus and then they put out in theaters. It's like, yeah, it's still a bankable
Yeah. Oh yeah, and they
production
are doing a
company and
live action of that as well. So
uh-huh.
it's yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't see it stopping anytime soon. Before we
No.
kind of get into a little bit some plot details of this movie, I do want to talk a little bit about what we brushed on earlier, which is like all the controversy around this
Yeah.
movie and the different ways that it was kind of dead in the water before
Yeah.
it was dead on arrival.
Yep.
That it's not just Rachel Ziegler's controversial, statements on red carpets that people don't like, which I don't even view as that controversial. But people are like, she said that they're going to change the character. Why are they even? I
Yeah.
just think that they overreact anytime there's like a brown person playing a role that it's stuff like that. But then there's also people who are staunchly opposed to Gal Gadot and her connection to the IDF and to
Right.
Israel and things like that.
Right.
And so it so much so to the point that like press was not invited to the premiere of this movie, which is
Yeah.
very, very
Very rare.
rare, especially for a movie this size. And then also, weirdly, I do you remember this? Do you remember when set photos were leaked?
Yeah.
And every time a set photo is leaked online, it's like the production company's doing this to sort of drum up excitement for the
Right.
project. Set photos were leaked of what people thought were the seven dwarves.
Right.
And it was these seven people and just like like live action people, and one of them was a little person, and
Yes.
people went, are these the dwarves? And they were diverse in race, and it was
Yeah.
men and women, and so people were like, oh geez, woke Disney changing the
Yeah.
dwarf,
Yeah.
this you know and then when the picture came out of Rachel Ziegler with the animated dwarves, people went, oh, so they went back in retroactively and
Right.
changed it to this. And that's what everyone thought had happened. And what that does is it puts the narrative into, the culture that this movie's a mess already, that like they can't decide on their
Right.
it's sort of like, Ugly Sonic. Like Ugly Sonic
Yeah.
comes out in the
Yeah.
trailers, people freak out, they go back, they fix it, and people go, okay, fine. But it sort of says like, okay, so created on the back end, you guys don't know what you're doing right now.
Right.
But it turns out that leaked set photo, those characters are in the movie. There's a new group of seven characters who are the seven bandits, who are Snow White's love interests, like merry band of,
Yeah.
adventurers in the woods. They're new characters, but they didn't like delete these characters and replace them with digital versions of the dwarves. They're a different group of seven. And I think that's a
Yeah.
problem this movie has, is like kind of too many characters.
Yeah.
But the fact that Disney like bungled that they released the photo of the seven bandits first, they must have known that people were going to assume those are the seven dwarves. Like no
Yeah.
one knows
Oh
who this
yeah.
is. And what it did is it creates the image that the filmmakers don't know what they're doing on the back end creatively. And so
Right.
before the movie even comes out, people go, oh, this thing's a mess. The reason why it cost $300 million is they had to go back in and digitally replace all of these live action actors. And it's like, no, that was never actually the thing. I don't know how this movie wound up costing $300 million. I mean, there were some practical sets that I think are pretty impressive,
Yeah.
in like the kingdom and stuff like that. And I thought that the costumes were lovely, and I thought
Oh
that there
yeah.
was production design that was really, really
Yeah.
nice. Um, but I still don't think that I saw $300 million worth of
No.
uh, money on the screen.
No.
But I just think that there's so many things before it even released where it was like, wow, you guys really didn't
Yeah.
give this movie a shot. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I really don't know. I mean, was that what I don't know what's true and what's not. Did they actually have to go back and reshoot? But I mean, even still, it's not even a big deal. Uh, and I do think that it was all it was all mishandled all around. It's not just one person's fault; it's everybody's fault, really. Who was involved in the production? I do think that Rachel Zegler did not help herself by
sure.
the way what she said was not necessarily bad. It was how she said it, in my opinion. Like it
Yeah.
just, she said that like, oh well, it's a, the movie came out in 1937 and like you can really tell. I mean, she was just saying it in a
It's
very
it
demeaning
sounded like
tone.
yeah. It sounded like she was disparaging the
Yes.
original property, which people were going, "Hey, the whole reason why we're remaking it is because it's a beloved
Yes.
property, and if the star looks down on the movie,
Yeah.
then." I
Yeah.
get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I get that too. And the most simple thing that she could have done is just say it in a better way. Like, listen, oh yeah, this movie is beloved by everybody. It's got some amazing animation, but we wanted to take it, we wanted to bring it to a more modern, take a more modern take on it, something like that, right? Just say it in a way that's not disparaging the original property.
Absolutely, of course, because I don't disagree with her that the original has
Right.
problems, and also that it's like 'cause there are people too who don't like all the updates on the story, and I'm like, the original the plot is thin, like,
Oh, it's super thin.
there's nothing there, it's just,
No.
like, this queen who has a mirror, and the mirror's like, "This 15-year-old's hotter than you," and she's like, "Then kill her," and, like, and that's the
That's the
movie,
movie.
and then she gives her an apple, and she dies,
Yeah.
and then a prince comes and kisses her while she's unconscious, and that's
Yeah.
the movie, and it's like
Yeah.
there's not really a lot there to
Yeah.
chew on, and I think that I actually kind of like some of the things that they did. I get it that it does feel like they just mashed together a different
Yeah.
princess stories, like, they sort
Yeah.
of gave her Cinderella's backstory, and they gave her, like, elements of Sleeping Beauty's
Yep.
movie and story,
Yep.
and yeah,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, it was, and the updates to the character made her more active.
Yeah,
It did not make her passive, it made her more active, which is good. But yeah, it was more in how it's all handled.
yeah,
And I mean, the one thing that she did say, she's like, the prince stalked him. The prince was stalking her. Like he's a stalker for real. And I'm like, no, he didn't. Like
yeah,
I watched the movie today. I watched the original 1937 today.
mhm,
She is singing about hoping she can find her prince, and he walks up on her singing and he comes and sings with her. Now they
yeah.
see each other for literally 30 seconds and somehow they're in true love, which that doesn't make any sense. But he's
Thin.
not stalking her. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
thin.
yeah,
And so it's like it's not that's even in this movie they know each other for like a day
right.
and they fall in love, which is almost as ridiculous.
Yeah,
So,
the movie gives them, like, a few more scenes to
yeah.
have, like, some conversations and to
Yeah.
get to develop some kind of rapport, but it's still, like, not
Yeah.
enough to feel like you found the true love of your
Yeah.
life, you know?
Well, and
But
the absolutely.
yeah.
The thing that I really had a problem with in this movie, so Snow White, the original, is great because it's the first full feature animated movie, and they were really showing off.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, and I'm pretty sure they did it on ones, which means that 24 frames they drew 24 frames. A lot of animated movies just do it every 2 or every 3 frames. They duplicate frames just to make it easier on them because it's
Sure.
extremely hard. But this one, and I could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong. But this movie is beautiful. The original 1937 is beautiful. The animation is amazing. It's not. It's extremely thin on plot, but you look and it's just little vignettes. Each section is like a vignette of whatever is happening, and that's what Disney would do. They just make these shorts, and they would do them, and that's kind of how the movie is. And if you take it for that, like they're just showing off and like, oh wow, this is really cool. It's much more enjoyable. But there's no story there. There's just not a story.
But also in 1937, that's what a lot of filmmaking was.
It was.
A lot of filmmaking was just like, "Hey, is anyone?" I mean, think about like Buster Keaton movies. Like,
Oh yeah,
there's
yeah.
not a plot. It's just
No,
like it's just scenarios for Buster Keaton to do stunts,
exactly.
and
Oh
it's like it's just showing what's possible on camera.
yeah,
Or even
and
Charlie Chaplin movies to a certain extent. It's like
oh
some of
yeah,
them have plot, but some of them are just like, let's set up a scenario for Charlie Chaplin to do a funny thing or and
yeah, yeah,
that's all they were kind of showing is like, look what the future has in store. Look what
yeah,
we've made. This really
yeah,
and so
yeah. And they're figuring out structure and plot, and they're figuring it all out, and it's
right.
those movies are fun. And
Yeah.
the 1937 I really enjoyed because of that.
Mhm.
Again, looking at it like story wise, it's not even there. The problem with the 2025 Snow White that I found is that they added a lot to the character, but once she got to the seven dwarves house, the movie stopped
Mm,
and it ran into the same problems. It was just like, what's happening? Like
mhm.
nothing is progressing. Nothing's going anywhere. So you have this beginning and end that like actually progress the story, but everything in the middle is just like it just reverts back to what it was before.
Yeah,
And so for me, I'm like, okay, you got to do one or the, it goes into the weird mishmash of this whole movie,
yeah.
like trying to be have one foot in one side and another on the other. So that was what was frustrating. The 37 version works because of what it was.
Mhm.
This one should have tried to go all in on the updating and given it more progression in the middle.
Yeah, that's kinda what I think, 'cause I listened to one reviewer who, I usually like her takes, I usually agree with her, but she said she made some comment where she was like, "They only have 2 numbers from the original." And I was
Yeah.
like, and that's what I meant when I was like, "Well, what do you want? Do you want it
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
the exact original with all the same songs and nothing changed? Or do you want an update?" Because in my opinion, I don't even think they needed the 2. I think that the 2 are nice to have, like, the little n I think maybe, like, "Hi Ho" is enough, because that's fine. It's like, yeah, let's do everybody knows hi ho, and it's the dwarves,
Mhm.
and like you can't really have the dwarves without doing hi ho. Even Whistle While You Work, it's a thing where it doesn't really fit in with the new plot that they're doing, because
No.
Cinderella's on, or Snow White is on exactly. She's Cinderella for the first half of the movie. She really is.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
she is.
but Snow White is on the run from her evil stepmother, Cinderella,
Yes.
and and she falls into a river. Did you notice this little visual detail where they had her iconic red headband come off in the water and, like, float?
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah.
And so, like, what they're I felt like what they were doing there is being like, "Say goodbye to the old Snow White." You know, like, it's kind of a thing where, like, she
Yeah.
wears the red headband
Yeah.
for, like, one scene, she gets chased into the woods, she falls into this river, and the headband comes off, and they really make a point of showing that. I kept thinking that, like, one of the animals was going to bring it to her and be like, "We
Oh,
found
yeah.
this,"
Yeah.
but it never came back, and I was like, "Okay, so they were
Yeah.
trying to say something visually there about, like,
Yeah.
yes, she's wearing the iconic Snow White dress, but it's a little different." And that's sort of how the movie felt, is it's like, it's all
Yeah.
the iconic imagery that you're used to, but a little different. Anyway, she's running, she finds this house in the middle of the woods that the animals help her find. She's tired from running away, she takes a nap in their bed, but once they come home from work, she's just sort of like, "Well, I live here now with you, and let's straighten this place up." And it's like, "Well,
Yeah.
what are we doing now?" And it's like, well, the story says she's friends with these guys. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, but in our new version, we were trying to give everything motivation and
Mhm.
root
Mhm.
everything in. So like, and I felt like there was some stuff in there, how she was like, "I can't go back yet, but I need a safe place to lay low while,
Yeah.
well," and I think that they tied some of that in there. I do think though, like I talked about, like, earlier I said, I would have liked to have gotten to know each one of the dwarves more, because I think the ones that we focus the most on are Grumpy, Doc, Dopey,
Yeah.
and Happy. Happy gets, but like Sneezy and Bashful, I didn't even know who Bashful was. Like, I was like, I
Yeah.
don't know which, and I
Yeah.
kind of thought maybe they were doing a thing where they were like, the thing about Bashful is you're never going to see him because he's so bashful. He's
Yeah.
not in
He's
the
never on
movie.
screen.
He's never on screen. And like
Yeah.
Sneezy sneezes like twice in the movie,
Yeah.
and you're like,
He
okay,
does.
so that's Sneezy. He sneezed twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but this movie doesn't have time to get to know each one of them as much as we would like to, because we have this new group of 7 that are attached to the love interest. I agree. I like that there's more to this guy than he's just like a hot prince wandering in the
Mhm.
woods who comes upon a hot maiden. I like that there's more to him, and I like, you know, but I thought it was a strange choice, him and like his band of 7 and her band of 7, and
Yeah.
I didn't quite know what they were trying to do with that, but it also feels like
Yeah.
too many characters for me to, 'cause I the only 2 people that we really get anything on in his group is the one little person that's in
Yes.
his group
Yeah.
talks about how he's got a crush on one of the girls in the group, and
Right. Yeah.
that's kind of all we get.
Yeah.
But
I don't even know if like any of the other ones actually talked.
I don't think so.
Besides the other guy who's like, "Thanks for dinner." And
Yeah,
that's
yep,
it.
yep.
So
I
yeah,
don't
that they
yeah,
were I don't even know why they were there.
they
But
were all
yeah,
bashful.
yeah, they were all they were all bashful.
This
Yeah,
guy,
it's
this one dwarf, and all 6 of these guys and the bandits, they're all
yeah,
bashful, and
yeah, 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 and I think, oh man, this so many things that I was frustrated with this movie, but overall it is nice that they added more to the character and that they added more of the relationship. That helps. The relationship was super thin though. I mean, again, they only know each other for like 2 days,
Yep,
and the also the thing that just felt like everything was so uh everything was so, oh my gosh, what is the word? Convenient. Everything was so convenient for Snow
sure.
White. You know,
Yeah.
she's like, "No, don't kill him." You know, he's caught stealing the print. I don't even remember what his name is.
He's not even a prince, he's just
The
a
love
guy.
interest. He's a bandit. The bandit,
Jonathan.
Jonathan. Thank
Jonathan.
you.
Yeah.
Uh, couldn't get a more memorable name.
Yeah, totally.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Jonathan is caught stealing. Snow White's like, "Oh, you shouldn't steal," and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to steal." And then he goes. He goes. The Queen's guards catch him, and Gal Gadot wants to kill him, and Snow White's like, "No, you shouldn't." And he finds out that she's Snow White, and she's like, "Tie him to the." Gal Gadot's like, "Tie him to the front gate and let him freeze to death." And then Snow White just walks out and unties him, and that's
Yeah.
it. Like, there's no
Yeah.
guards around. What's
Yep.
going on? Like, there's
There's
nothing
never
there.
any guards around in this movie because
No.
later on in the movie, Jonathan and the huntsman are in a dungeon together and they like break their chains and they
Yeah.
just escape and no one's there to like once
They're
they break their
all they're all
they're just like,
practicing their musical number
yeah, like we're
for the
at,
evil queen.
yeah, I don't know. Do you watch Severance by chance?
I have not watched season 2, but I love season 1. I need to get on the season 2 train.
There's a big thing at the end of season 2. I won't spoil it for you, but there's a
Okay.
big
Yeah,
thing
don't.
in the season finale where it's like, where is the security at this
Yeah.
building? Where like
Yeah.
the whole kind of finale goes down on this day when you're like, surely there must be somebody assigned to security at Lumen Industries.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
characters are just like running amok in the office. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
is no one going to come stop this?
Right,
And
right.
yeah, so there, yeah, but
Yeah,
even great. So here's my thing about all of these like plot contrivances and plot holes and
yeah,
problems with
yeah.
Snow White 2025. I don't disagree with any of them.
Yeah, yeah.
I think they're all totally valid. My thing is I'm very forgiving of plot contrivances and conveniences
Yeah, me too.
and plot holes if I'm having a reasonably good time.
Yeah.
And what I just kept finding myself doing is like I just kept being like, "Oh, that was a little cute moment with like those 2 characters," or a musical number, even like, yes, it's thin between Jonathan and her. Of
Yeah.
course it is. I don't know how much more they could have built into source material that is
Yeah.
so thin.
Yeah.
And they at least give them like 3 interactions before they sing a song about being in love rather than just, I mean, Snow White 1937, they basically fall in love the moment they
Yeah.
meet by singing a song together.
Yeah.
But this one, it's like, and then the song does what musical theater will do sometimes, which is like kind of a fast forwarding
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
it's like they sing a song together that's about them realizing that they like each other.
Yes. Yeah.
And that musical theater can kind of do that where it's like,
Yeah.
let's kind of fast track this emotional beat in a song so that we can,
Yeah. It
say several scenes worth
yeah.
of development in this one musical number,
Yeah. It is not, I mean, it's not any worse than a lot of other movies.
Yeah.
This one is. Snow White, the original 1937, is so bad. When it comes to that, when it comes to
Yeah.
the love, they sing a song for, like I said, like literally 30
Yeah.
seconds, and they're in love. And then the prince comes at the very beginning of the movie, and then at the very end, and he's nowhere in the middle. So this one is like, okay, it works.
Jonathan's at least a character in the
Yes,
movie
he
who's
is,
doing things.
and it actually like works on that
He
level.
steps
I
in front of an arrow for her. He,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think the rest of it, just the thing that was frustrating to me is it just didn't really feel believable for me. And I think a lot of this comes down to performance. And I want to get your take on this as well. But I felt so Rachel Ziegler, amazing voice.
Mhm.
She can sing really, really well. And but I had a problem. I had a problem with the 3 leads performances. So I had a
Sure.
problem with Rachel Ziegler's performance because it seemed like she was taking it way too seriously. I
Mm.
had a problem with Gal Gadot's performance because she was hamming it up like crazy, and she was having a lot of fun with it, but nobody else seemed to be having fun.
Well, I also don't know if Gal Gadot has the chops
I agree.
to ham it up as much as she was 'cause
I agree.
I will say this, 'cause people are giving her a hard time.
Yeah.
Mostly people are dragging her performance. Like, that's the performance that people are coming the hardest for,
Yeah.
is hers, and I agree. I don't think that Gal Gadot is actually as that strong of an actor,
No.
and
She's good in her role that she can play.
I will say I was impressed with her vocals.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that's actually her or if they did, like, some AI sweetening on the back end, I don't know.
Never
I
know.
know that Hollywood's doing that now more and more in musicals, but I
Yeah.
was impressed with her musical number, but it still felt like this role should probably go to someone with
Yeah.
more chops who can
Yeah.
really like, maybe
Yeah.
like a Michelle Williams or someone who can, like, really dig into it
Oh, that
and,
would be
like,
awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
she would have been amazing.
yeah,
Yeah, I liked Gal Gadot's performance more because I felt like the movie should have been a little bit more silly,
mhm.
and I didn't like Rachel Ziegler's performance because like I said, I felt that it was too serious, and it was like
I think that's a good criticism of her performance because she was
sh-
real yeah, it's like
it
she
was
needs to
like
have more fun in the
yeah,
movie.
like it was just like this is the most important thing ever, and I mean, for this movie, I don't felt like it worked,
Yeah, yeah.
and so it was like, and then the guy, I just didn't. I felt like there was no real chemistry between the two. It just,
He's just a very prototypical
yeah,
Disney, love
yeah,
interest
and
boy.
he's kind of like trying to be like Flynn Rider, and like
It
trying to
was
be like a grunge type, which was weird. So it's just none of the performance really synced up
yeah.
as they could have. So
That being said, I don't think that Ziegler or the guy were, like, actively bad. I don't
no,
think
no,
that they
no,
were
no, no, no,
making bad
no.
choices. I think that they both sang nice uh, and again, it's like, I keep coming back to, like, what are audiences expecting of
Yeah,
Snow
yeah,
White?
yeah,
Like, I think that I just was not expecting anything. I just was like,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
expect anything from this movie. So
Yes,
anything that it would give me that I would go, "Oh, that was kinda nice. That was kinda fun." I just go
yeah,
like, "That's more than I thought I would get."
right,
And
right,
yeah, this guy, you're totally right. It's just like, he's just such a Chad Michael Murray, prototypical, like, you know,
yeah,
18 to 25 years old, like, hot white guy that could have been in any number of Disney movies that we watched growing up on the Disney Channel, and
yes,
he's definitely aped from Flynn Rider, 100%. And that's the other movie I forgot to leave out is, like, she gets Cinderella's backstory, she has elements of Sleeping Beauty, like the floating dress that the
yeah,
animals float around, and she has, Rapunzel's boyfriend,
yeah,
and it's like
yeah,
they they kinda cobbled together other princess movies that have better stories to
right,
give this one a better story, and I think it would have been more interesting if they could have found someone that didn't feel so similar to another
yeah,
guy from another princess movie, but also it's like, don't all these princesses kind of bleed together, and don't all these guys kind of bleed together? Like,
yeah.
yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
and yeah, no, I think you're totally right. A lot of these do bleed together. I
Yeah.
think the thing again, just going back again, the thing for me, you have 3 different actors who are acting for 3 different types of movies.
Sure.
So that was
And
and that goes into the overall messiness of the movie because again, you have this beginning and end that are very much more not traditional. They're very much more modern takes.
mhm,
They have a story that they're following and the structure and everything. And then you have the middle that is very much the 1937 type, which is nothing's really happening. It's just kind of funny moments.
yeah.
And so it's can't really decide what it is.
Yeah, I also like a lot of people have pointed this out, and I definitely am like, yeah, that's a weird thing for the writers to be like, let's include this and then do nothing with it. That
Yeah.
they just decided for who knows what reason to say that the dwarves in this one have magical powers associated with the stones that they mine, and they show it for 2 seconds during
Yeah.
the number hi ho that when they touch stones they can like make them do magical things, and then it never comes back up in the movie again. And it's like
Oh,
cool, what it's like, what an interesting thing to add to the seven
yes.
dwarves that they have magical stone powers, and then to be like, but don't worry, that won't impact the plot in any, because it's like it'd be one
Yeah.
thing if they wanted like in the climax of the third act to
Yeah.
have the the dwarves show up and use their stone powers in some way to help
Yeah.
Snow White out. But it's like, no, it's just like the
Yeah.
movie's like, just so you know, in this version, they can do that.
Yep.
It's like, well,
Well, and
okay.
all it was is like they put their hand on stones and then it lights up like where the gems are. Wasn't that what it was? Like that
Yeah.
was it, right?
And there's a good thing and a bad thing here. I did like that because I don't think the original does this, but I did like that what the original does have is we know that these dwarves go and work in a mine where they
Yeah.
mine diamonds.
Right.
And what this movie does is it kind of makes the diamonds central to the society of this kingdom. That
Right.
it's like the diamonds are the source. It's almost like the source of the kingdom's magic and the kingdom's
Yeah.
wealth and the
Yeah.
kingdom's good spirit. And the queen sort of takes all the diamonds for
Yes.
herself and
Yeah.
hoards them and her whole kind of aesthetic is she's always just like adorned in all the
Yeah.
diamonds and stuff. And I kind of like this comparison that she makes between Snow White, who's like a rose, which is frail
Yeah.
and breakable and can die and can decompose, and her beauty is more like a diamond. It's hard and sharp
Yeah.
and coarse and perfect and unbreakable.
Yeah.
And I liked that, and I kind of like that this
Yeah.
movie did something with the iconic imagery of these diamonds. It was just weird to then also add in like, also the dwarves have magic diamond powers, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, and it's like, and is that attached to the plot in any way? It's like, not at all. No,
Yeah.
just
No, nope.
wanted to say that. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Yeah. Very,
So
very strange.
so
The other
good
thing
thing
going
and bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing going along with that, the thing that it was also wishy-washy, the
Mhm.
fairest of them all.
Yeah.
This is the thing that immediately I was like, "Really? Are
You
you
didn't like
gonna
the
do
double
that?"
entendre?
No, because it doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense when
I liked the double entendre.
I got it, but it's like, okay, the magic mirror is supposed to say, "Who's the fairest of them all?"
Yeah.
The evil queen is talking about beauty,
Yeah.
and Snow White is talking about fairness and equality
Yeah.
and those
Justice.
things. Justice, yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
And but what is the mirror saying? Why does the mirror say that she's the fairest and then also the
I
evil
kind of
like
think that the mirror's kind of saying both. The mirror's like, she's hotter than you and she's better than you. But
but like they were used so interchangeably and
right.
like but like why like and why would the if it's it is a double entendre but like okay who are you talking about and which one are you talking about? Are you talking about the justice version or are you talking about the beauty version? And like who, because the evil queen is talking about the beautiful version, so why is the mirror saying the beautiful but then she's not, she's just,
No,
it may I just
you're
I
totally
didn't get it.
right. You're totally right because if the mirror's metric of what makes someone beautiful is inner
Yeah.
beauty, is like the inner strength, which is what it says at the end.
Yeah,
Literally,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the mirror's like her beauty comes from within, and that's why she will always be prettier than you, no
Yes.
matter. But it's like if that's the way that the mirror measures beauty, then the mirror should have never considered the queen the fairest of them all
Yeah.
because she never was.
No.
So the mirror should have always been like, everyone's better than you. Like
Yeah.
you're like the least fair person. Like you're
Yes.
the most selfish, most narcissistic, most self-obsessed person. So
Yeah.
you in this kingdom at least, you have the least inner beauty on offer. But you're right, because the mirror's metric appears to be for the first half of the film that it's just talking about surface level beauty, that
Yes.
nobody's hotter than you, Gal Gadot. And
Yeah.
then once Rachel Ziegler's like 16, it's like, actually, she's hotter than you now. But then at the end of the movie, it's like, and she's got more inner beauty too. And it's like, well, do you care about inner beauty or
Yeah.
not? I totally get that. I
Yeah.
think that that's a totally and again, this is one of those plot contrivances, plot hole things that I'm like, totally valid, totally
Yeah.
fine. And also, I like it. I like being like,
Okay.
I like you because the language, who's the fairest of them all, is so iconic. It's sort of
Yeah.
like the diamond thing. I like finding a way to fold that into this modern adaptation where it's like, well, let's use the double entendre of fair. So at
Yeah.
the very first song in the movie, her dad is singing to her and he says these like words that he wants her to be, and it's like brave,
Yeah.
fair, like true, or
Yeah.
and he means fair in the just sense. Like you should be a
Yeah.
leader who's fair. Um, and I thought that that was immediately. I was like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool like double usage of that term. That's so um integral to
Yeah.
this story.
Fearless, fair, brave, and true.
Fearless, fair, brave, and true. And I thought I dig that. It is weird though that the mirror cha- this magic
Yes.
mirror goes from being about beauty that's skin deep to
Yeah.
beauty that is inner beauty. And I was like, when did the
Yeah.
mirror decide that
Yeah.
it changed its metric of
And
yeah,
that's what frustrated me because
yeah,
I like the update.
yeah,
I'm totally with you. Like, oh, fair and just.
uh-huh,
Like that makes sense. But then they brought in the beauty part of it. So it's like, well, how like if you're gonna go with fair, make Gal Gadot actually have try to, give the people stuff, but it's totally empty, right?
yeah,
Something that she's like actually they're on the same page when it comes to that. Or I don't know. But I guess you can't really
yeah.
have it either way. So that bugged me. I did like the update, but I didn't like that they were trying to combine it. Again, just
I
kind
think
of
it's a totally valid plot
yeah,
contrivance.
yeah,
I think it's similar to because it's like I say this with like every MCU movie where I'm like, I love
yeah.
Captain America: Civil War, and Zemo's plan makes absolutely no sense. It makes no sense that he thought
Right.
he could lure Winter Soldier, Captain America, and Iron Man to this location all at the same time and guarantee that they would fight each other to the death
Yeah,
after
yeah, yeah.
watching this VHS tape. It's
Exactly.
it's
Yes.
stupid, but I like what the movie does for
Right.
the overall
Right.
story of the MCU at that point, and I like a lot of the themes in the movie, so I'm like, "That's fine." And the movie's a lot of
Yeah.
fun to watch. And so
Right.
this is a kind of another one of those things where I'm like, I like that the writers took a shot there with like the double entendre, and you're totally right that it makes no sense that the mirror
Right.
would have two different standards for how it's judging beauty. And I also
Yeah.
am like, it's Snow White. Who cares? Like,
Yeah.
I like that for little kids, I like that they get to internalize the message about inner beauty being stronger
Right.
than outer beauty. And I like that little kids hopefully get that wordplay of like fair
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
fair has multiple meanings and stuff,
Right.
and that it's not just about who's hot and who's
Yeah.
not. And
Yeah.
so I don't mind it as much, but you're totally
Yeah.
right. It
Well,
doesn't make
and
any sense.
it's a great point. You bring up a lot of great points. I think when we will forgive things if we like the movie, and
Yeah.
then if it's too much, like, and that's everything that I've said kind of goes into this wishy-washiness of it. And because it was the acting, because it was the middle part, like all of them all of them stack up, and it's too much. It's a leap that I couldn't make because I didn't get it. But I totally see why why you could make that, and why it's because it really is not a big deal. If you like it, that's great. But
So a
yeah,
few
it was
things I do want to say, and I already mentioned this earlier about like, this $300 million price tag that's
yeah,
insane,
yeah,
is there is some, like I said, some really impressive production design in here that's practical that
yes,
reminded me kind of Wicked that we saw earlier this year, where like we had some
right,
really cool practical sets. And I do want to just say that performance aside, every time Gal Gadot showed up in a new dress, I was like, "That's awesome!" Like
yeah,
everything she wore, I thought was awesome.
yeah,
Everything
yeah,
that she showed up in, I thought was really, really cool and had like a really
yeah,
striking visual tone to it.
absolutely.
Um, I want to talk about the ending of this film so we can get into our scores.
Okay,
The sort of Deus ex machina of this movie is we have a confrontation with Snow White and the
the evil queen.
the evil queen outside of the castle. You guys know the story. Everything's already happened. The evil queen turned into an old lady. She gave her the apple. She ate the apple. Flynn Rider showed up and gave her a kiss, and they go back to the castle to confront the
Yeah,
queen. And she shows up as Little Red Riding Hood for some reason. I don't know. We had to throw Little
it's
Red Riding Hood. Yeah, for some reason she has to
not
turn
even a
into
Disney movie.
yeah, she has to turn into Little Red Riding Hood too. But she shows up. She has this confrontation with the queen, where the queen basically kind of makes this kind of choice to the people. Like, do you want a wilting flower as a leader, or do you want someone strong like a
Yeah,
diamond? And
yeah,
again, I like this sort of using the iconography of Disney fairy tales, of even like the wilting flower has a sort of Beauty and the Beast thing to it.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and this, and what now a lot of people don't like this. I'm kind of into it, and I'll explain why.
Okay,
What happens is Rachel Ziegler, Snow White, gets the queen's guard, her army, and the people of the town on her side by reminding them of what the kingdom was like before the queen took over. That they used to live in a kind of harmonious commune together where even though her parents were the king and queen, they shared wealth, and everybody was prosperous, and nobody went hungry because they didn't have enough money, and
Mhm.
nobody, like everybody had enough, and everybody had an abundance, and everybody,
Right.
they shared the wealth of the kingdom,
You're
and that
right.
was sort of the magic of the stones. And she sort of remembers the names of people and who they were before. And they do this thing that reminds me of South Park where they go, I remember, I remember. And immediately I was like, yep, member berries are going to show up going, I remember. And, you know,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
and it is corny, and it's a little bit of like I can totally see why people feel like it's a weak ending to the movie. And for some reason, once this happens, the mirror, I guess, like absorbs the queen and kills her
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I don't
I
know how
get
that
that.
magic works. Whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of magic elements to this movie that we just have to go. That's fairy tale magic, and who
It's
knows?
magic, shut up!
Yeah, it's magic. Shut up.
Yeah.
But here's why I kind of dig this ending, and I'm gonna throw some like
Okay,
new age socio-political game.
okay.
This is my bag on my other
Right,
channels
right,
that I
right, right.
do.
Yeah.
1937, Kramer, all right?
Okay,
What's
okay.
going on in the 1930s?
Uh, I mean, Hitler's starting to
Sociopolitically.
rise.
Yeah, and what's going on in America
Oh,
economically?
man. Well, the depression.
Great Depression.
Yeah.
Stock market crashes in 1929.
Yep, yep.
1930s, we got Hoovervilles, we got people, we got families that are barely making it. How do we get out of the Great Depression? What pulls us out of this?
The war.
The war and FDR and the New
The
Deal, right?
New Deal, yeah. Mhm.
New Deal. Okay, so here's my whole on the way home, I was like, actually, I like that a lot, because I don't think that Walt Disney was making an allegory about the
Right.
New Deal and about I think that Snow White 1937 was escapism. It
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
let's
Yeah,
pull you out of the depression of your real lives and just show you
right.
something beautiful. But these updated writers are going, okay, so what happened at the end of the Great Depression is this era of like ultra socialism where the government stepped in and said, for a time, we are going to tell companies what they're going to make, how much of it they can make. We're going to give people allotments of like, this is how much we need you to manufacture. And we're going to have kind of like a lot of government, oversight. But the point is wealth sharing. The wealthiest people in America were paying a tax rate of like 92%. And so there was all this wealth redistribution going on for a period of like 15 to 20 years, that mixed with the manufacturing boom that the war provided and the economic boom of that led to one of the most prosperous economic eras in American history, which like
Mhm.
that's the era that our parents were born into, the baby boomer era,
Right.
where you could have a house, a nice house with like land for a job that was a working class job, a working class 9 to 5. And there was an era where like people seem to live in abundance, where the wealth
Right.
of the country seemed to be shared more equitably and fairly than it is today. And I think that what these writers, I would not put it past them that what they're trying to say with this whole thing is like, this kingdom used to share its wealth more equitably and more fairly. It no longer does. It now is ruled by oligarchs who hoard the wealth for themselves. And people are at the end kind of, I remember the time when we used to share with each other and
Right.
how much better that was for our kingdom. So I kind of dug that. I was like, I like that you guys threw that in there. I like that you guys, and I don't know if it was intentional, but I wouldn't put it past them.
I wouldn't put it past him either. I
Yeah.
think I think it's very, very possible, if not
Yeah.
probable, that that's what they were doing. I
Yeah.
think the thing that was dumb is the fact that all she had to do was remember somebody's name.
Sure.
And this is
Sure.
the reason this is the reason
Yeah.
why I think it's dumb. They did set it up, but then they set it up at the very, very beginning, like, oh, she took away she made all the farmers be her guard,
Um,
right? So it's like, okay, you had that, and then Snow White's like, I think it's important to remember people's names. Good, but you never did anything else to build it up again.
sure.
Like, you need to do it. You need to do it at least 3 times. You need to set it up, you need to enforce it, and then you need to pay it off.
Sure.
And this did not do any sort of enforcing. It was kind of like, oh, well, we talked about it at the beginning, and then in the end, it's kind of like, okay, it's not Deus Ex Machina completely because
Sure.
you did it, but it's like barely not Deus Ex
Yeah.
Machina. So it's just kind of like I like I like the fact that like it's important to remember people's names and you can do a lot with it. But then it was also done because it's like, are they under a spell? Can they not remember who they were? Which also goes into Beauty and the Beast because they can't remember who they were before they were turned into something else. So yet again, another movie that they stole from, if it was. So
That's probably the biggest problem of that this movie has is it's just like borrowing from too many different
yeah,
places and
yeah,
trying to do almost where the first one is the original is too thin. This
yeah,
one's trying to inject too much, too
yes,
many themes, too much plot, too many new characters.
yeah,
And it's like, I think that keep the plot simple, keep it streamlined still, and just inject some new themes and maybe a little bit more, uh, a little
uh-huh,
bit more for your characters to do so that they are active and not passive, like you said.
yeah,
But
yeah,
they maybe just overdid it a little bit so that there was not enough time in a 90-minute movie to,
right.
to
Yeah, yeah. And one thing I want to ask you, and then we'll get on to our scores.
mm,
What did you think about the songs? Besides the two that were from the original, what did you think of the new songs?
I'm okay with them. I like Waiting on a Wish, and I don't hate Gal Gadot's song "All Is Fair." I think that that is a fun number. I do. I have a kind of just like a personal like, just like gripe with Pasek and Paul. I just feel like
Yeah,
I just want somebody else to write songs for movie musicals. I just
yeah.
immediately when she started singing at the beginning of the movie, I was like, Pasek and Paul wrote these songs. Like I can just I
You
just
knew
knew
immediately.
I just knew
Oh,
immediately.
that's awesome.
I was like, I know this is Pasek and Paul. Like I just
Yeah,
and and for a lot of people love their sound. And to be fair, my favorite composer of all time, Stephen Sondheim, has a very recognizable sound. When you hear a song written by Stephen Sondheim, you know it's a song written by Stephen Sondheim.
yeah,
So I'm not faulting Pasek
yeah,
and Paul for having a sound. It's just a sound that to me is like the popification of musical theater.
yeah.
And I don't think that it is a style that blends well with the style of the 1937 song. So
I
they
agree.
have this like this they're not they're kind of fighting each other.
Yeah,
That being said, I didn't think that they were terrible. Like there were several songs that I was like, that's a pretty clever song. I thought that like even like the Princess Problem song, I was like, that's a clever song. Like it's not
yeah,
great, but I thought the strongest songs were probably Waiting on a Wish,
yeah,
and Gal Gadot's Number.
yeah.
And but
Yeah, I
yeah.
hated the princess problems.
Yeah.
And I think you're right because again, it goes into the clash of everything.
Yeah.
Like cuz I was like I don't know as much about Pasek and Paul like you do love La La Land though, right?
I do, and I think it's because they collaborated with, Justin Horowitz or
Oh,
who
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Right.
is that his name, or is it, the guy that was the composer
Yeah,
that
yeah.
collaborated with them? I
Right.
think it changed things up enough for
Yeah.
them
And
that
they
I
weren't as big. They probably didn't have as much power back then.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah. And but
mhm,
I did think like I did like Waiting on a Wish. The first song was really really good. I
mhm.
thought, "Oh, this is nice." Everything else was just kind of middle of the road, but it did feel very much like it clashed. And it didn't seem to fit. Again, just the movie just not being able to fit. So,
I'm just worried for American musical theater in general right now. I just feel like if our strongest voices are Pasek and Paul, and even I love Lin-Manuel Miranda, but like when we hire Lin-Manuel to write everything too, I'm just sort of like, I don't know that
yeah.
Lin-Manuel is I think he does a specific thing
Yeah.
brilliantly,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I
I
I
I
get
think you're
yeah,
totally right. I think it's actually it kind of is almost like a we're very, very obsessed with, like, name recognition,
yeah,
especially with Hollywood trying to sell things, they want more names that people recognize so that they can have a better chance at selling stuff, so Lin-Manuel Miranda is huge, so they're gonna do that, so Pasek and Paul are gonna try and do that because from those same songwriters as, La La Land
Greatest Showman,
Greatest Showman and, Dear
Dear
Evan
Evan Hansen,
Evan
yeah.
Hansen, all those so they can use those, but then that just creates such a small group, and it kind of doesn't
I
leave room for
know.
everybody else. So
I
I think it's a good. You have a very very valid point.
I think that maybe that's what it is I just want more people. I just want more
Yeah,
songwriters to get a shot.
yeah,
I just when I just like it's not that I dislike Pasek and Paul because I liked these songs. It's
Right.
just that, and when I immediately knew that they had written the songs, I was like, "Oh God, another
Yeah.
Pasek and
Yeah.
Paul show." And I was like, It would just be interesting to hear something that sounds different from what I'm
Yeah.
used to, and
Yeah.
then to look it up and go like, "Who wrote these songs? Oh, interesting." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, I think it's a very good point. That's we're probably on the same page with that. So
Yeah. Okay, let's get into our scores. If this is your first time watching our show, we do several scores out of 10, 10 being the best. We do a technical rating for how well we think the film was constructed technically, cinematography, special effects, story, acting, all that stuff. We do a score for the ending. We do a score for rewatchability. We do a score for cultural significance. And we do a score for our subjective feelings about the movie. Um, so Kramer,
yes.
technical score for Snow White 2025.
Technical score, I gave a 6. I thought the sets were really cool. The costume design for the most part was great. The bandits felt very off to me.
Mhm,
This with the hoodies and like I don't know, it just seemed weird. But everything else, Gal Gadot's, I loved her crown. Like I
mhm.
loved that crown. I thought that was awesome.
That
And
stained glass crown.
oh yeah, it was beautiful. And
Yeah,
the costume, even Snow White's costume, just the detail that you could see, like the small details in it. I loved that. I thought it was awesome. So there's a lot of craft in on the technical side. And even Mark Webb, like you said, there were some sequences that were like, oh yeah, this is entertaining, like it's a good song or whatever. But then I docked it a lot of points because it was so all over the place.
sure.
But a lot of the technical, it looked really good, sounded good. The costumes and all that were good. So
I thought your technical score was gonna be lower than mine, but mine was 6 as well,
yeah, great.
and, I thought yours was gonna be, like, 5 or 4, but I liked the construction of this movie just enough, and I think that, like, 6 is I just expected to give this movie, like, a 3 or a 2 on a
Yeah,
technical
yeah,
rating, and I just came away going like, that just was again, I said at the beginning of the episode, it's not a great movie. Don't
right,
get me wrong. It
right.
is not great cinema. It has a lot of very valid problems as we've discussed, but it was better than I thought, and I can't really give it much more than a 6 technically, but I got to give it up for that production design, for some of those costumes, and for a few really entertaining musical numbers.
Yeah,
Uh,
there you go.
and how about the ending?
The ending I gave a 4,
Mhm.
and that's kind of what we went into. It was a little, it was a little Deus Ex Machina,
Sure.
and I just didn't enjoy it.
I gave the ending, and maybe I should go a little lower, but I gave it a 6.5. It
Okay,
might be my I again, because I kinda felt like by the end of the movie, I hadn't seen a scene that made me go like, "Oh my gosh." I and also my little, like, radical leftist socialist heart kinda liked this little commentary
right,
that was
right.
shoehorned in there. I was like, "Yeah, get him. Yeah, point out yeah, yeah, and so
Nice.
I'm gonna give it a
Yeah.
6.5. What did you think of the rewatchability for this movie?
Rewatchability, I put it 4. I
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not as interested to see it again. But I mean, again, this a lot of people think this movie is worse than it actually is.
Yeah.
So it's if I had to rewatch it again, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
I have never rewatched a live action Disney remake movie, and I don't think I will rewatch this one either. I put it at a 4. I've never seen Lion King a
Yeah.
second time. I'm sure you have because you have little kids, but
Yes.
I have never rewatched a single one of these, and I don't think I'll rewatch this one either. I if it again, like you said, if it shows up and I have to sit down and watch it, I won't be like, "Oh, this terrible movie."
Yeah.
So,
Not like
it's not
Craven.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
it's not
no,
the
no, 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 no,
yeah,
no.
exactly. It's not the lowest score I could give, but 4.
Yeah.
Cultural impact of this film.
Okay. It's, I gave it an 8. Not that it's a good score, but I mean, this movie's been talked about for years, and everybody's been talking about it. Everybody's been like, it's just made such an impact. It's made a big impact, so I feel like it should be a big score. So that's why I gave it an 8. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good.
No, that's not what cultural impact means.
No.
It
No.
just means like, is this going to affect the industry of
Yeah.
filmmaking in some way? Is
Yeah.
this going to affect cinema in some way? Is this
Yeah.
and definitely this movie could have a big effect on Disney as a production studio.
Yes.
It remains to be seen. My cultural score is at a 5, and I'm a little bit taking like a coward stance and just being like, I genuinely don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know if Disney's gonna just write this off as like a whoopsie and just keep forging ahead the way that they've been going, and if we're all gonna forget about it in like a year, or if this is
Right.
going to be seen in 5 years as like a turning point where, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I did see this. I thought this was very interesting. I saw somebody on YouTube talk about this, that he felt like this is going to change movies forever in how they deal with PR,
mm,
because this has been such a PR nightmare, and because Hollywood really wants to get people who have a high social following.
mhm,
They're going to start imposing stricter contracts that basically say you have to post what we say, and we're going to kind of take over your social media, or
yep,
we're going to be very meticulous about what you can and cannot post. And so I think this could have an effect. It could be a big deal down the road, or maybe it's just they're just trying to forget about it and move on.
yeah,
So we'll see.
yeah, okay, subjective score. Your subjective score for Snow White 2025.
My subjective score is a 4. Didn't love it.
Yeah, totally fine. Mine
Yeah.
is a 5.5 because I'm
Okay.
just above the midpoint where I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
again, not a great movie, but I was pleasantly surprised that I was able to sit through the whole thing and kinda just be like, "Yeah, no,
Mhm.
okay,"
Yeah.
and that I wasn't actively hating it.
Yeah.
And so but that does not mean that I loved it by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just over the halfway point of
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
enough. So, yeah, that's it. What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think about my political theories? Y'all in the audience, let us know. What do you think about the double entendre of the word fair? What do you think
Yes.
about the mirrors not knowing how it grades beauty? Did you see it? What do you think about Disney's handling on the PR end of this? Let us know.
Yeah.
Sound off in the comments. Kramer will respond to you.
I
Someone on our
will.
last episode was like, I hate this show. And Kramer was like, thank you for your feedback. And
I did.
yeah. And so you can even do that. And
Yep.
yeah, you handled that so much better than I would have. You're like, thank you for the I was
Hey,
like,
they're helping with our engagement.
yeah.
So
So leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, do all of those things, and we will see you on the next one.
bye-bye.